Welcome to AP Calculus and welcome to the first lecture video. This video is actually going to be an overview of why we want to study more math, and we're going to actually do that by looking at an article that appeared in the New York Times a few years ago. This article was called A Mathematical Challenge to Obesity from the New York Times. It followed Dr. Carson Chow, who posed a scientific question based on what he saw in the world. Alright, and the question he asked was, why has obesity become such a problem in America? Now, the article itself didn't really focus on the deep mathematics, except to mostly say that he used a mathematical approach. But he does draw this distinction in the article between a mathematical approach and a scientific approach. And I want to discuss some of the differences. Either way, though, we start with some kind of scientific question. A question about the world, about why things happen. So the scientific question is about what we want to know. And typically, that's followed by some kind of hypothesis. Now, in a scientific approach, we would typically then go ahead and design an experiment which would be performed and used to collect data. That data would then be reviewed and processed and analyzed, and we would obtain results. We would, from those results, draw conclusions, and then potentially use those conclusions to inform decisions. And in the article, Dr. Chow mentions that the reason he doesn't use a scientific approach, the reason he didn't design an experiment and perform it, is because such an experiment would take too long. And in many cases, when you're performing experiments that involve the activities of real-life people, it's very hard to control. So he proposed the use of a mathematical approach, which starts off in the same place with the scientific question and the hypothesis, but then kind of skips the experiment and looks at existing data and analyzing that data just as you would in a scientific approach, but using that data to create a mathematical model, which would typically be one or more equations that you can plug in variables and obtain a result. And then from there, you once again can draw your conclusions and make decisions, whether those decisions be personal decisions, choosing to eat better, or choosing to change your food purchasing habits, or implementing some kind of government policy, new laws, or changing existing laws. And I just want to mention that the article is available on the course website, and it's a good article, so I suggest you read it. It's a fun look at a real-life application, and it's very conceptual. They don't really explain the mathematics, and I'm not even sure that he used too much calculus in this specific application, but it just gives an idea of how math can be useful and how math can influence decisions about the real world. And certainly that's true about calculus. It's this power of mathematics that we want to have, and hopefully this course will help you develop your ability to implement calculus in your decision making. And before I close this video, I just want to make a note moving forward on independent learning. Now, this course is online primarily, and that gives you a lot of freedom. Freedom to choose when you do your work or when you don't do your work, because I, as the instructor, will not always actually be physically present. So it's really going to be up to each student, each of you, to complete your coursework, and not just complete it, but even excel at it. It's going to be personally driven, even more so than any regular classroom experience. And I will be here to support you in that, of course. That's what I'm here for. But I will provide some support for you guys, which is in the form of solution sets. For all graded work, I will after the due date, I will post solutions for each of the problems so that you can look back at the solutions, see what you did right or did wrong, or just see how things might be done differently and learn from those solutions. Again, and those solutions are available. They're not going to be required, but they're available and they're strongly suggested. In particular, the solution sets are useful when you're preparing for tests. The other support that I will be providing is through communication. It's really going to be up to you also to make sure you're utilizing communication, making sure your voice is heard, even if we are not physically seeing each other. Make use of the discussion boards, ask each other questions, provide insights to each other, and help each other. The solution sets are not required, but the communication on the discussion board is mandatory, at least to some extent. But I also encourage you to go beyond the required minimum number of posts and make it a lively community, because I believe that this is what's going to help the class grow and thrive together. And I certainly will be providing insight and discussion on the discussion boards as well. So I will always be available through that. And of course, please check the course schedule, because I do have my office hours on the course schedule where you can bring any questions and actually physically see me, and we can discuss whatever concerns you might have about the course.